Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. You know, when you look at the entire span of human existence, it can honestly feel like a massive, chaotic jumble of names, dates, and ancient wars. But map it out visually, and this brilliant, almost terrifying structure suddenly emerges. Today, we're stepping back to look at the big picture, how we went from chipping away at stone tools to literally building artificial intelligence. Let's get into it.
To keep us grounded on this epic journey, we've got a really clear roadmap to follow. We'll start by mapping the timeline, then move through the rise of bronze, the classical golden ages, the misnamed dark ages, the emergence of the modern era, and finally wrap up with some fascinating repeating patterns of the past.
Section 1. Mapping the Human Timeline, CE, BCE, and Prehistory. So before we can dissect the past, we really need to agree on how we actually measure time, right? Now, you probably grew up using AD and BC, but CE, Common Era, and BCE, Before Common Era, are the standard historians use today. And honestly, it makes total sense. Around 75% of the world isn't Christian, so a neutral term just works better globally. Oh, and here's a fun, kind of confusing quirk. There is absolutely no year zero. The year 1 BCE flips right into 1 CE. Plus, most scholars agree Jesus was probably born around 4 BCE anyway, so that old scale was already a bit wonky.
Here's an absolutely crucial distinction. History doesn't just mean everything that ever happened. It's actually got a super specific definition, and it starts roughly around 3300 BCE. Why then? Well, that's right about when the very first writing systems popped up. Literally, without written records, you can't have a history book. So everything before that point, which is over 200,000 years of Homo sapiens just wandering the Earth, that is all technically prehistory. Following the classic three-age system, historians categorize our earliest massive leaps forward based entirely on what kind of materials humans were forging into tools. We leave the massive Stone Age in the dust when writing kicks off, jumping straight into the Bronze Age, which runs until about 1200 BCE, and then we hit the Iron Age. It's just a wonderfully simple, elegant way to track our technological evolution.
Moving right along to Section 2, the rise of bronze and our early civilizations.
This is where humanity truly began to build, write, and invent. The Bronze Age saw an absolute explosion of human ingenuity, and it happened independently all over the globe. It's wild to think about. Over in Sumer, modern-day Iraq, they were inventing the wheel, the plow, and math, while at the exact same time, the Egyptians were stacking up the Great Pyramids. Meanwhile, you've got the massive, sprawling cities of the Indus Valley in modern Pakistan, even though we still haven't deciphered their writing. And over in Norte Chico in Peru, they were constructing these huge stone structures without any writing system at all, not even pottery. It really goes to show that human civilization doesn't just follow one strict, predictable tech tree. But, progress is almost never a straight line. It's actually terrifying how nature can just decide to hit the reset button. Enter the 4.2 kiloyear event. About 4,200 years ago, a massive climate disaster triggered a full century of extreme worldwide drought. This wasn't just a tough summer. This was an absolute civilization breaker. It completely reshuffled the deck of global superpowers, leading straight to the rapid, devastating collapse of both the Egyptian Old Kingdom and the Akkadian Empire. Humanity bounced back, sure, but then hit an even wilder mystery, the Bronze Age collapse, right around 1200 BCE. Major advanced civilizations in Greece, Anatolia, and Egypt essentially vanished almost overnight. The historical record goes completely silent, kicking off the Greek Dark Ages and forcing the push into the Iron Age. And what's truly fascinating here? This silent, undocumented period is exactly when legendary tales like the Greek Iliad and the Jewish Torah supposedly take place. Basically, when written history took a pause, mythology stepped right in to fill the void.
Up next, Section 3, the Classical Golden Ages and the Foundations of Today. Emerging from that darkness, we hit Classical Antiquity. Right around 600 BCE, there is a profound shift. We finally don't have to rely purely on digging up broken pottery anymore. Why? Because of writers like the Greek thinker Herodotus, often called the father of history. People just started actively recording things. They were essentially saying, hey, I'm going to write down the complete history of this war or this culture. Human philosophy and literal history books finally take center stage.
And listen, this absolutely was not just about Greece and Rome laying the groundwork for Western civilization. Let's look at the whole map. This era laid foundational stones for the entire globe all at once. Down in Mesoamerica, the Maya were dialing in their incredibly intricate calendars and writing systems. The Silk Road cracked wide open, physically linking Eastern and Western Eurasia for the first time. And maybe most crucially, our modern moral foundations were basically born together. Greek philosophy, the Bible, Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, the teachings of Confucius, they all caught fire during this incredible, worldwide classical era.
All right, Section 4, the misnamed Dark Ages. Let's get a global perspective.
So, all golden ages come to an end. Around 500 CE, Western Rome falls, and we enter the Middle Ages. But I love debunking this one. Calling this era the Dark Ages is literally only accurate if you're standing in Western Europe. While Europe was busy struggling with barbarian conflicts and crumbling Roman roads, the rest of the world was absolutely thriving. The Middle East was experiencing a massive golden age with the rapid rise of Islam. West Africa saw the boom of the hugely wealthy Mali Empire. Its ruler, Mansa Musa, is widely considered the richest human being to ever live. And in the Americas, the Aztec and Incan empires were at the height of their power. The lights were only out in one very small corner of the planet. That being said, Western Europe and parts of the East did go through a terrifying domino effect of massive shocks. First, you had large-scale migrations, the Huns basically shoving Germanic tribes across the map. Then hit the years 535 and 536, sudden extreme weather and global famines, most likely kicked off by a massive volcanic eruption that literally blocked out the sun. Top it all off with the plague of Justinian, the first real bubonic plague, which wiped out up to 50% of the population in some eastern cities. It was the absolute perfect storm of chaos.
And just to hammer home the sheer scale of global events unfolding in the background during this time, the Middle Ages actually birthed the single largest land empire humanity has ever seen. Kickstarted by Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire swept across Eurasia and completely rewired global trade, borders, and entire populations. It's a stark reminder that the Middle Ages weren't just guys in mud huts. They were incredibly dynamic, deeply violent, and highly globally connected.
Moving to Section 5, the modern era emerges through rebirth and revolution. This brings us to the sixth and final major time period, the Modern Age. And surprisingly, it begins with absolute devastation. It sparked this wild domino effect. First, the deadliest pandemic of all time, the Black Death, eradicates up to 50% of city populations across Europe and beyond. But that horrific, unprecedented loss of life fundamentally altered society and economics. It arguably led directly to a massive renewed interest in classical art and philosophy, what we call the Renaissance. And that intellectual rebirth, it paved the runway for the scientific, industrial, and ultimately technological revolutions that you and I are literally living inside right now. Destruction quite literally bred creation.
Finally, Section 6, repeating patterns of the past and the lessons they hold.
Now that we've fast-forwarded through thousands of years, a massive, undeniable macro pattern emerges, connecting the ancient past directly to our present. Think about it. The transition from one massive historical era to the next almost always involves a very specific triad of chaos. Sudden climate events, widespread mass migrations, and devastating pandemics. We saw it trigger the end of the Bronze Age, we saw it at the fall of Rome, and we saw it spark the dawn of the Modern Age. Which leads us to a pretty sobering realization, and honestly, the final thought I want to leave you with today. Consider our modern day, especially looking at the events of the 2020s. We are actively dealing with global climate events, unprecedented mass migrations, and worldwide pandemics. So, we really have to ask ourselves, is a brand new era starting right now? Are we standing on the exact kind of historical boundary line that future historians will draw on a chart 1,000 years from now? I hope this explainer has given you a powerful new lens to view, not just the ancient past, but the actual history we are making today.